Guys, welcome back to my channel. It's your girl Michelle N. Johnson, Miss Fighting Fiercely, and today is episode 2 of Endo Eats, the show where we discuss varying topics surrounding the endometriosis diet, also known as the anti-inflammatory diet, where we give you tips and insight on how the diet works and how it could possibly benefit you regarding your pain management and treatment options for endometriosis. We're also going to be getting into some pretty cool product reviews in case you guys are in the process of transitioning or eliminating foods from your diet. I'll give you my recommendations of some pretty cool and tasty things to substitute with. So last week, we kind of started off by just kind of defining and discussing what the endometriosis diet is and how it affects endometriosis, the reason why we have an anti-inflammatory diet, the pros, the cons to it, and what that means for us in terms of symptom management. So I kind of want to just do a quick overview if you guys missed last week's episode of what we talked about. And then today we're going to kind of build on that and get into some more of the nuts and bolts, if you will, of what the diet is and also what we can eat if we're doing this diet. And eating regimen, eating program. I told you guys last week I really am not fond of the word diet, but we talked last week a lot about what we couldn't eat. So this week we'll be talking about some of the things that are recommended for us to eat. So just as a quick review, last week we talked about the 7 main categories of foods that those with endometriosis should stay away from. And those included sugar, gluten, red meat, dairy, alcohol, and soy. And we also talked a little bit about the different types of food groups or eating categories that some of us may be in. Some of us, like myself, who consider themselves to be flexitarians, we may dabble in one or more or nibble across all of these eating categories, right? So, of course, you have your carnivores, which are your standard meat eaters. And we have those who fall into what's called the standard American diet or SAD, right? And we don't pass judgments here, so if that's your thing, that's your thing. That typically doesn't work for us endo peeps. So you have your carnivores, and then you have your plant-based eaters, right? And within plant-based, you have your vegans, your vegetarians, your raw food vegetarians, and those different categories. So let's just kind of get into it. And even though people use vegan and plant-based interchangeably, they're not quite so. So let's get into it. So under the plant-based diet, you have fruitarian, which is a person who eats exclusively raw fruits and seeds, or whose diet consists of 70% fruits and about 30% vegetables. They primarily eat raw, but they do sometimes eat frozen or slightly cooked fruits, and that's acceptable for them. Then you have what's called your raw food vegan, and that is a person who excludes all food and products of animal origin, which includes clothing, makeup, body products, all of that good stuff. And they only eat foods cooked at a temperature of above 100. I'm sorry, let me go back. A raw food vegan is a person who excludes all food and animal products, and they also exclude food cooked at a temperature of above 105 degrees. So that includes raw fruits, vegetables, seeds, nuts, grain, legumes, sprouts, plant oils, sea vegetables, herbs, and mushrooms. So raw food is they do eat food that is cooked or warmed. It's just not over 105 degrees. So then we have our vegan. Vegans are people who do not use or eat animal products. And that, like I said, that includes clothing, hair care products, bath and body products. They're all consuming. They don't eat or consume in any way animal byproducts. They do eat cooked foods from the raw vegan food list as well. So then you have what's called your lacto-vegetarian, and this is a person who abstains from eating meat and eggs, but they may consume other dairy products. Then you have your ovo-vegetarian, which is a person who abstains from eating meat and dairy, but they consume eggs. Then you've got lacto-ovo-vegetarian, a person who abstains from eating meat, but they do consume both dairy and egg products. I know, it's a lot. Then you have your pescatarian. This is a person who doesn't eat meat, your red meats, chicken, poultry, fowl, but they do eat fish. Like I said, then, there's me, the flexitarian. This is a person who consumes mostly a plant-based diet, but they will have the occasional inclusion of meats, eggs, or dairy products. And one of the most popular ones in the last couple of years has been keto. And keto is a term for a low carb diet similar to that old school Atkins diet, where the idea is for you to get more calories from protein and fats and less from carbohydrates. With this particular eating program, you stay away from the carbs that are relatively easy to digest, like sugar, soda, pastries, and white bread. However, you do need to be mindful if you're a person who's considering the keto diet, because if you have diabetes, keto can trigger a dangerous reaction called ketoacidosis. And this happens when the body stores up too many ketones, acids that are produced as a byproduct of burning fat, and your blood becomes too acidic. So again, if you have diabetes, definitely consult with your doctor for modified versions of the keto diet if you're interested in doing something like that. Then you've got the paleo diet, which typically includes lean meats, fish, fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds. This diet is one that consists primarily of foods that could be obtained in the past, primarily through hunting and gathering. A paleo diet limits foods that became common when farming emerged about 10,000 years ago. Those include dairy products, legumes, and grains. So most paleo folks do not consume those foods. Then lastly on the list, you have a Mediterranean diet. This is a diet that's traditionally followed in Greece, in Crete, south of France, and parts of Italy. These diets emphasize fruits, vegetables, nuts, grains, olive oil, as opposed to butter for the primary fat source, and grilled or steamed chicken and seafood as opposed to red meat, plus a glass or two of wine. And it goes on to say there's not one specific type of Mediterranean diet. It can vary from one country to another. Also, differences between some regions within the same country. However, what I just gave to you guys is kind of like the overall gist. And I know that that was a lot. And even within those subsets, there are people who do keto vegan, right? So I'm sure that is definitely not an exhaustive list, but just to give you a little bit more insight if you were confused as to like what the heck does any or all of this means. And obviously you'll want to consult your doctor before or nutritionist before jumping into any of those regimens. Self-study is good. I'm a huge advocate of self-study. That's what I do a lot when I bring you the information here. But I always like to check with a professional or a specialist or an expert in that field to make sure that the information that I'm giving you guys is correct. So, having said all of that, we know what the eating groups are. We know what we can't eat on the Endo diet. So that leaves us what? Last week I talked about, oh my God, this is winter here in Chicago. This is comfort food season. Cheese and dairy, that's huge for a lot of people. Mac and cheese eaters, So what can we eat? So what I want to do first is kind of give an overview of some of the different categories of foods that are acceptable, and then using some information that I got from the Center for Endometriosis Care, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail with some specifics. So anti-inflammatory foods, some of the major categories there, we've got vegetables, nuts and seeds, fruits, fatty fish, herbs, spices, cold pressed oils, and then your teas, or your drinks, I should say. And so some of the foods that fall into that, your vegetables, you've got avocado. Well, avocado is a fruit. But your vegetables, you've got bell peppers, bok choy, broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, chard, fennels, garlic, green beans, kale, your spinach, leeks, sweet potatoes, and turnip greens. For your nuts and seeds, you got your almonds, your flax seeds, hazelnuts, sunflower seeds, walnuts. I add to that, for me, cashews as well. Fruits, you've got cherries. Cherries is a huge anti-inflammatory fruit, and there are tons of recipes. If you don't like to eat them, straight up, you can put them in smoothies. That's one of the staples that I put into my smoothies for anti-inflammatory response. Again, fruits, avocados, blueberries, kiwi, lemons, limes, those are especially anti-inflammatory. Strawberries, tomatoes. With regard to fish, my favorite, salmon. I could eat salmon all day. Tuna, whitefish, snapper, trout, oysters, herring, halibut, cod. That's a relatively inexpensive fish as well. Fresh herbs and spices. I love, 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 love fresh basil. You've got cinnamon, cloves, turmeric, and ginger are especially great, for reducing inflammation. I recently started using more rosemary and thyme in my cooking. Those are great herbs that add lots of flavor for your food, especially like when you're eliminating salt and sugar. And they also are very good for reducing inflammation. Oils, you've got olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, some caffeine-free teas and drinks. Those are all excellent options. Other sources talk about fiber-rich foods. So again, that's also going to be a lot of your fresh fruits, vegetables, legumes, your whole grains. Iron rich foods. A lot of you guys know, those of us with endo also tend to battle anemia because of the copious, blood loss. So we tend to be iron deficient. So iron rich foods that don't come from meat, you've got your dark leafy greens, broccoli, your beans, and again, your nuts and seeds. Also, antioxidant-rich foods comes from colorful fruits and vegetables, such as your oranges, your berries, spinach, beets, and dark chocolates. Beets, I know, are very, very good, but that's one of the food I very, very much do not like. But what I've come to compromise with regard to beets is I've come across a couple of smoothie recipes that when you put the beets in there, it kind of masks the flavor a little bit, and it makes it palatable. I'll say that. I won't say that it's super tasty, but it's palatable. And I know that I went through that list kind of fast, so I'll put the links to the websites where I got that information from down below, so that if you want to go through them and visit them in more detail, you can. What I like to get into now is the more detailed list. So we kind of went through those food groups, right? But I want to kind of go in a little bit more detail using information that I pulled from the Center for Endometriosis Care. And also, it's important to reiterate here that going through this process isn't going to be overnight. It's going to take time. I've been at this for about 10 years, still trying things, still experimenting with things, still finding foods that resonate with me, and still finding foods that are a bit triggering that maybe was not triggering for me a few years ago. And so it's important to know that one endo person's food triggers are definitely going to be different from another's. And this, again, not an exhaustive list. There are tons more food sensitivities and things that we aren't discussing here, again, which is why it's important for you to work particularly with your own doctor, your own nutritionist, for your own conditions or comorbidities or hormonal issues that may have an effect on what of these foods may or may not work for you. So the biggest one that we talked about was eliminating wheat and gluten from our diets. And I mentioned to you guys that I recently was tested and found to have a wheat gluten sensitivity of my own. So for the past 6 months or so, I've been working to remove gluten from my diet. And so the Center for Endometriosis Care talks about the key to going gluten-free is choosing foods that are naturally gluten-free, like brown rice, wild rice, quinoa, millet, amaranth, legumes, sweet potatoes, and squash, instead of our typical bread, pasta, baked goods, breakfast cereals, quick bars, and things like that. Although it can be tempting, to grab those things on the go, sometimes we can kind of sacrifice convenience for nutrition. But those are some of the key foods that are naturally gluten-free. Another thing to remember too is that when I was working with my nutritionist, she was explaining to me that most of the refined foods, your white breads, your white pastas, and things like that, she gave me like a visual to say that every time you remove something white, you want to add something colorful or flavorful to that. So for example, when I took white bread out of my diet, I replaced it at the time with whole grain breads and whole wheat breads. And then once I discovered my gluten sensitivity, I removed that and stepped down to gluten-free breads. When you're taking away white rice, you can replace it, as they mentioned here, with brown rice or wild rice. I've even discovered that there are black rices and red rices and yellow rice, which you guys know I talked about. That's one of my favorites. If you're getting rid of like white potatoes, replace them with, sweet potatoes. So those are just a couple of options for you there. Another one of the no-no foods is soy. And it tends to be in everything we eat. That's one of the hardest ones to eliminate completely because, as I mentioned last week's episode, a lot of the meat replacements, a lot of the vegan cheeses, a lot of the healthier food items are replaced with components of soy or wheat or gluten or all of the above. And so that makes it kind of difficult for us when all of those things trigger anti-inflammatory response. Some of the other variations of soy that you may see in your products is soy protein, soy isolate, defatted soy flour, soy lecithin, and soy oil. And again, they talk about here, it's in a variety of dairy substitutes, meat substitutes, tofu, soy sauces, and a lot of condiments and pre-made sauces. So again, it's that trade-off, that convenience for making sure that we're reading our labels more intently. There are nowadays GMO, non-GMO verified versions of soy sauces. I have been able to find some gluten-free soy sauces. Other substitutes include tempeh, tamari, and nama shoyu. I hope I read that correctly. Other substitutes that I have personally found was liquid aminos. Trader Joe's has a variation of that called coconut aminos. And then, like I said, I've actually found some gluten-free and non-GMO brands of soy sauce. But even with those, you should still use them rather sparingly. Another huge one, another trigger for me was dairy. I love me some cheese. Love, 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 love some cheese. And over the years, I have explored and experimented with different vegan cheeses and vegetarian cheeses. And like I said, the biggest deterrent for me is that the majority of them contained soy. Other components to look for if you're avoiding dairy is lactose, which is a milk sugar that a lot of people have difficulty breaking down, which could contribute to a lot of pain and cramping and bloating, which is a symptom of endobelly, which many of us experience. And you also want to look for a product called casein or casein, which is a milk protein found in a lot of different foods. Excuse me, and that can cause bowel upset as well. And if you have endometriosis on the bowel, that can irritate those lesions and lead to increased pain in the bowel and pelvic area. And also sometimes it brings on bouts of nausea. So if you're like me, where dairy is like one of the strongholds that you have, they do recommend non-dairy alternatives, which nowadays we have plenty to choose from. You've got almond milk, coconut milk, rice milk. I've even seen now they've got hemp milk. They have pea protein milk. Tons of options there. You've also got raw nut cheeses, which are good options for you guys. And I can't wait to cheese day when I do my product reviews on all the different cheeses that I've tried. They also talk about if cheese is a struggle for you, or if you're just stepping down from meat. One good thing to consider is trying foods that have been grass fed, or cheeses, I should say, that have hormone and antibiotic free. It also says that some people can tolerate grass-fed goat or sheep's dairy, particularly unsweetened low-fat yogurt and some of those other fermented products. So try grass-fed goat cheese or sheep's cheese as you're stepping down. But if not, you're sticking with regular cheeses, try those who have been treated that don't have the hormone and antibiotic free for that. Let's see. And also, if you are looking more into vegan and vegetarian options, some plant-based sources of calcium, if you're not eating cheese, are again going to be your green leafy vegetables, raw almonds, salmon, sesame seeds, and broccoli. those are some things to consider and adding to the diet as well when you are eliminating dairy. When you talk about oils, butter, lard, we're cooking, we're baking, we're sauteing, we're roasting, we're usually using some sort of oil. So even the healthy ones, canola, sapphire, corn oil, those aren't particularly good for people with endo. So instead, you want to consider cold pressed olive oil, avocado oils, also organic grass fed butter or ghee. Those are considered to be the most heat stable and the best choices for cooking. So again, we talked a little bit about red meat when we spoke on dairy. Those two kind of go hand in hand because they tend to trigger some of the similar symptoms in one another, which kind of makes sense because you get your cheese and your meat from the same source, right? So again, they talk about here, if you can tolerate some meats in moderation, you want to choose lean cuts of certified organic, free range, and grass fed meat. So as you can see, there are options. It's not like we're just dead in the water and we don't have anything to eat. And again, it's a step down process, right? So it's just a little bit of give and take when you are eliminating foods. And your food journal that we talked about in episode 1 is going to help tremendously with that once you start to identify sorry, my bangs are annoying me. Once you start to identify what those trigger foods are. Another point that they talk about here is soluble fiber. It's great for keeping your bowels moving smoothly and getting rid of all of that excess bloating and excess hormones that we don't need. So again, the best foods for getting your fiber is going to be your fruits, your apples, your pears, your plums, beans, lentils. They talk about whole oats, your citrus fruits, and also chia seeds and flax seeds and psyllium husk powder. That could be a little grainy and gritty to me. I prefer chia seeds and flax seeds, and I'll talk about those in a future episode. And lastly, alcohol. We know that alcohol is extremely inflammatory. It's hard on the liver. A lot of the drinks are made with sugars. A lot of them are made with wheat and also caffeine and a lot of our teas. But if you're a coffee drinker, it can be hard. It can be hard to let that go, right? So they recommend eliminating those altogether or only indulging in a drink on a special occasion. I will have to research the app because I don't want to give you the wrong thing. I want to say this app is called Barnivore, but I think it's an app that you can actually use to see if your favorite alcoholic beverages are vegan or not. And nowadays, there are tons of companies that actually produce vegan wines, vegan beers, vegan liquors. So you can typically use Google or research an app. And again, I'm going to double check to make sure that that's the name of the app, but I think it is. You can also find gluten-free wines, sulfate-free wines, all of that good stuff so that you don't have to give it up entirely. For those of you who are giving up, coffee, like, nah, not my coffee, right? I have found, I've never been a big coffee drinker, but when I discovered roasted dandelion tea, to me, that has a very smooth, strong, coffee-esque flavor. It's very reminiscent of coffee, has a little bit of a nutty texture to it. I love it. And dandelion has also been known to promote liver function and cleansing and detoxing of the liver. So it's also great for that. So check out roasted dandelion tea. I use traditional medicinals. Typically get it from any grocery store, drugstore, and of course, there's trusty Amazon. So those are just some suggestions for you guys of what you can eat, what you can incorporate, how you can go about transitioning foods into your diet as you begin to eliminate from your diet. And along with that, as we're integrating, healthier foods, there are some supplements that, according to Endo News, has also been known to help reduce inflammation or otherwise contribute to symptom and pain management. Some of my favorites they list is magnesium, zinc, calcium, iron, B vitamins, vitamin C, vitamin A, vitamin E, and selenium. My favorites that I personally try are magnesium, B12. I've tried vitamin C and vitamin E. And one that isn't listed here is vitamin D. And if you go back to the video that I did on endo fatigue, I'll put the link up here as well. We talked about vitamin D, lack of vitamin D being a possible contributor to endo fatigue. So I would add that to this list as well. So I hope that some of these have been helpful for you, that it'll give you an idea of where to start. If you're doing your endo journals, and you're into your second or third week, you should be finding or able to pinpoint some of those things that are trigger foods for you. And then once you do, then you can kind of use the list of the information given here to slowly start transitioning over or eliminating those trigger foods and replacing them with foods that will help with your inflammation. Two really quick things before I wrap up. I know this video is kind of long here, but the information was, worth putting out here. Two things to remember also when you are transitioning is to have an open mind. And what do I mean by that? A lot of times we get stuck because we're like, oh my God, my list is so limited, I don't have anything to eat. But if you start wrapping your mind around when you can, or unwrapping your mind, I should say, and get out of the box of, I can only have certain things for breakfast. I can only have certain things for lunch or for dinner or for desserts, right? You can have cabbage for breakfast. You can have sweet potatoes for breakfast. I had sweet potatoes for breakfast this morning. You can have rice and beans for breakfast. You can have salad and salmon for breakfast. You can have, breakfast foods for dinner, or soups and stews, things like that. It doesn't have to be this one relegated list. And I found that helped me a lot. When I broadened, when I could eat what foods during the time of day, I found that I wasn't so restricted with my meal options. And the other tip is, you got to be open to experimentation. And when I was doing this, when I was first starting, one of the tips my nutritionist gave me was, every time you go grocery shopping, right, swap out, one eliminated food. Just pick one new food every time you go shopping. And that way you're not going to break your budget. You're not going to break the bank just buying and grabbing up all sorts of things. If you want to check out Google or Pinterest beforehand to try to get you some recipe ideas, that's cool. If you have an idea of something you've always wanted to try, that's cool too. But just swap out one food. The majority of foods that I eat now that I didn't eat before, I found them using that method. Just trying one thing, and over time, week after week, month after month, you will have built up a pretty well-stocked arsenal of new and amazing foods that you didn't even know that was out there, and more importantly, that you didn't even know that you liked. So again, hopefully this information has been good for you. And if those of you who are interested in maybe like recipe books, there is a book that is very well respected in the endo community. I see a lot of ladies referencing this book, and it is called the Endometriosis Health and Diet Program. Get Your Life Back. It is by Dr. Andrew Cook of the Vital Health Institute. He is an awesome, highly prolific endometriosis surgeon and specialist. If you want to check out his website, it is thevitalhealthinstitute.com. And his book, again, the Endometriosis Health and Diet Program, Get Your Life Back. Awesome research. It has over 100 recipes in there, and it's all based on, the anti-inflammation endometriosis diet. And I will put a link down below in the description, so if you want to check his book out, and also to his website, the Vital Health Institute. So that's it for episode 2, you guys. Thank you so much for hanging in there with me. I know this one was a little bit lengthy, but I hope, as always, that you have been educated, enlightened, and empowered by what we've discussed here today. Hopefully you've gotten some tips to help you transition, some good ideas for food choices, and just some overall support. And hopefully the idea of eliminating foods is not so overwhelming for you now. So as always, if you like today's video, click like down below. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so that you can be notified when we upload new episodes. If you know somebody in the Endo tribe that could benefit for this video, please, please, please like and share. Don't forget to click the thumbs up. YouTube loves all that good stuff, and it'll help to improve the visibility of the channel. So as always, it is your girl. I am Michelle Johnson, Miss Fighting Fiercely. I'm gonna put all of my receipts in the link below. And then next week, I'm so excited. Next week's episode, we're gonna finally get into some product reviews. And again, if there's something specific you want me to talk about or review or discuss, please drop down into the comments below. Any feedback is always grateful, it's always warranted. Love you guys. Thank you so much for hanging out for me today. And stay tuned for next week. And as always, keep fighting.